What was my biggest takeaway working with Tony Robbins for 15 years? Wow, what a great question. And there's obviously so much. That the man has contributed so much to the entire field of personal growth. He's essentially the godfather of the entire coaching industry. I think he was the first person to coin the term, because he didn't want to be a mentor, he didn't want to be just a sort of sidekick. He wanted to be a coach, somebody that would help you become the best version of yourself. And I think he's contributed in many ways to that. But some of the best things that I learned, I think having a framework for understanding why we do what we do under the context of the 6 human needs. I think that was one of the greatest tools that I learned from Tony. And really then just mastering the refinement of that. Because there's only so many patterns. In fact, it was one of the most powerful things he actually ever said to me, was that if you want to get good at working with people and making a difference, get good at spotting patterns, because there's only so many of them. And I took that to heart. And so you'd be amazed that what people do follows only a fixed number of specific strategies and patterns. And once you start to identify them, you see the commonalities. It kind of makes sense, because we're creatures of habit, and we get conditioned. An external environment is pretty much identical for everybody in modern society, give or take. So we form very similar habits and therefore very similar strategies on how to deal with things in different situations and contexts. And depending on our background and our significant emotional events and our cultural beliefs and all of the other stuff that makes up our own model of the world, we'll have different categories of how we apply those strategies. So getting good at spotting that using the framework of not advanced dynamic psychotherapy or Gestalt or NLP or humanistic therapy or any of the other sort of genres and bodies of work that we were required to study, but only in a way that allowed us to see why they sometimes work and why they sometimes didn't, so that we could really dig beneath the onion. So I think one of the greatest things I learned working with Tony was to really have a framework for questioning why we do what we do and a lens with which to view the answers from. One of the things Tony's famous for is being able to get people to take massive action. It's the whole part of his success formula that he teaches about how to take massive action. And that a lot of the time is very useful, especially if your enemy is apathy or procrastination or you're unmotivated. By taking action, you can actually release motivation that was dormant when you were sitting on the couch. And it's really the trigger point for a lot of people. How I'd build on that, though, is to really invite people to look at categories. There are categories of action. There is passive action, where you are strategically thinking. There are categories of all-out massive action, just because you need to get stuff done. You don't know where to start, so you've got to throw a dart in the board. You may as well start now. And there's also opportunities for people to really say, okay, what is intelligent action, and what is action for the sake of it? So having a framework to basically ask better questions that would allow us to say, what kind of action do we want to be able to take, and when do we know when to stop taking action, would be a useful framework to be able to look through that methodology of. But one of the biggest causes of people not succeeding is inaction. So it has a huge benefit there. And as many people know, I teach different levels of applying ourselves to the reality of life through the lens of consciousness. And I chunk that into the sort of to me level of mentality, where you're a victim mode, everything happens to me. It's kind of one of withdrawal, one of justification, why you shouldn't participate in the game of life because it keeps beating you up. And for a lot of people, it's just really an exit trap door to stop them from having to embrace courage, to be able to move forward and take action in spite or in light of their fears. Then we have the buy me mode. This is where the whole sort of Tony focus really is. Tony's world is far more focused on getting people out of to me and into by me. If something's going to happen, it's going to happen by me. And that has, again, a huge place. There's no right or wrong here. There's no, what's better, a small tree or a large tree? It's a 5-year-old or a 15-year-old. Well, no, they're just at different levels of their own journey of potential. So for the whole all-out massive action side, it's geared more towards the buy me. I tend to work in through me. Through me is for people that don't need to be motivated. We've played that game. I don't need to be screamed at to be told to get off my backside. It's where you start to work with the unifying laws of nature, of life, where you're not forcing anything. Popular psychology calls it the art of allowing. Now, the art of allowing is usually used by people in to me as justification as to why they don't need to act. That's a whole different category. That's just lying to yourself. Sometimes when you're in the art of allowing, you're busier and actually doing more stuff and taking more action than those that are trapped in by me. But it's not frustrating. It's joyous work. You're working in collaboration with the unseen side of life rather than just the known side of life. If I was to put it in movie terms, Buy Me is about trying to fix, adjust, control, and sort of manipulate the set in the scene that you're in. In Through Me, you're working with the people behind the scenes, the set directors, the script writers, the producers, and you're essentially just acting as effortlessly and as professionally as you can in each scene, but the how becomes far less of your business. Whereas in Buy Me, if you're not working with script writers and set designers, you've got to figure it out yourself. And that may sound esoteric to somebody in Buy Me and somewhat alien to people in To Me, but you talk to people that live at that level, someone like Joe Dispenza, who's teaches a lot of that work now at a very high scientific level, then you really start to understand that there is another way that's less exhausting, doesn't need people screaming at you, doesn't need to motivate yourself all the time. And that's really where I would encourage people to build on what Tony's doing by really looking at it rather than an absolute black and white lens, but look at it through the lens of where do I fit in on that? There's times where I like going back to Buy Me. It's great. As an entrepreneur, I spent most of my 20s in there wrestling with reality, and I only really tended to give up when I realized it kept winning. So, for me, living in Through Me is just far more effortless. It's far more joyous. You roll with the punches. You sail with the bends in the river of life. You don't try to control the current. You work more on positioning yourself better in the current. And that's a part of the market that I don't think Tony serves or is looking to serve, nor should he. The challenge is that you spend a lot of your time in Buy Me, you get burnt out. And it's such a shame to see. I mean, we see this with so many examples. David Goggins, great example. Someone who is the epitome of Buy Me in the physical at the extreme level. I mean, who runs 100 miles on broken legs? I mean, it's like, the guy is a absolute freak of will, determination, and absolute relentlessness and refusal to quit. And that has its place. But if you run a car permanently on the red line, you're gonna burn out. And unfortunately, Tony's had a lot of health challenges even this last 12 months. He's getting grayer, he's looking older. He did his last seminar in a wheelchair. It's all about living life at maximum level. Now, again, nothing wrong with that. It's served the market he's at, but I would love Tony, for the sake of who he is and the gifts that he still has to give, to probably back off a little and start living life a little more through me, which I know he does in many respects, but his teaching style and his teaching audience has always been geared around the whole, get out there, make it happen, find a way, bust through it, your absolute archetypical Buy Me level of living. Oh, my favorite quote from Tony Robbins, there's so many, but it would have to be, and I widely quote Tony for this, and it was really the language that spoke to me most as an entrepreneur, and that is that the quality of your life is in direct proportion to the amount of uncertainty you can comfortably live with. And of course, the key word I picked up on there was comfortably. Why? Because we all live with uncertainty. We don't get the chance to live a life where there's total certainty, nor should we. Now, if you know all of the answers to the exam questions, you're in the wrong class. So there has to be a level of uncertainty that shows up in life. And I think the genius in that quote, where people have to get to a point of accepting that life is uncertain and being able to be more comfortable with that, because it is what it is. It becomes an adventure rather than a fear. It becomes something to take on and dance with rather than something to avoid or hide from. And that's really one of my favorite quotes, I think, of the thousands that I've heard Tony give. The best way for people to apply Tony's teachings, let's come back to basics. The best way to apply anything is to take action. Mostly it becomes data for later, or an expensive notebook that was good in the moment, feel good, but really ends up on the shelf and doesn't do anything. So the best way to apply Tony's teachings, or pretty much anybody's teachings, my teachings, it's what I'd call continuous spaced repetition. See, what Tony's famous for is for being people to go to a Tony event, which I've been to. I remember several of the UPWs that we've done in London over the years, where there was 10 to 12,000 people. I'm putting probably 1,000 people over the firewalk myself, on the Friday night, as it was back then. And it's like a rock concert. You walk in there, if that doesn't light your fire, your wood's wet. So all people leave UPW or Unleash the Power Within on a high, 11 out of 10. But of course that fades off unless you have some level of continuous spaced repetition, ideally on a weekly basis. and be able to create a peer group. And this is one of the biggest challenges I had with Tony's work, was that, and this was common knowledge, that the peer group of trainers, of which I was very honored and humbled to be a part of, there was probably about 50 or 60 of us at the time that I was most active in Tony's organization. We were an absolute powerhouse of talent. We were an incredible group of people. There wouldn't be anything that I would not ask a trainer to do and not have instant certainty that it would get done. You could parachute us into a war zone and give us a task and it would get done. And quite often that several trainers would go, a good friend of mine, Fraser, he, when there was a disaster, for example, the tsunami in, I think, 2004, over in Thailand and Sri Lanka, and he immediately just went in there as an aid worker and took charge and took a group of people and started making a difference. That's what you'd expect. We work with drug addicts, suicides, abuse cases, trauma, rape cases, anything that would show up as extreme in those seminars that we would need to be able to deal with absolute certainty and in a way that was far more effective than somebody spending an hour a week in therapy for the last 5 years. Whether it was the dynamic psychotherapy model, the younger model. No, we need to get results fast because these people are out of the door in 3 days. So that's how we were trained and that's what we did. And to be able to not have the benefit of that peer group, we'd get together several times a year as a trainer body, but outside of that, we weren't really in touch. Outside of that, we weren't really supporting each other, and it was such a shame. It was that you had all of that talent sort of leave, and it's the same for the participants. When they leave, what peer group do they have to go back to? For many years, we were trained in the 7 master steps of lasting change, and the 7th step was to create a supportive environment. Why? Because environment trumps will. You may have all of the best intentions not to start smoking, but if you live with 9 smokers, at some point, and somebody hands you a joint, at some point, environment's going to trump will unless you change your environment consciously. It's just the way we're wired. So, how could somebody apply Tony's teachings the best way? Through getting with a group of people who have the same ideas, concepts, intentions, desires, determinations, framework, values, and really work together with that outside of the Tony environment. And that'll allow Tony's teachings to have far more of an impact and legacy moving forward. Hey, this is Peter, and if you'd like to learn the most powerful techniques and strategies that Tony taught me on how to deal with any adversity that shows up in your life and live the life you were born to live, you would love my latest book, The Inside Track, where I show you how to apply all of the top secret techniques, some of the most advanced strategies for living life on your terms, and you can get a free copy. Just cover the cost of shipping by clicking the link below. Go check it out.